heard the orchestra play, I was in the 4th row, everything changed in me. And I remember going home in the car. I did not want to talk to my mother and father. I just wanted to feel that feeling that I was feeling. It was a definite physical sensation. And I didn't want it interfered with, and I knew I wanted that around me forever.
He may be the brother of actor Jon Voight, and therefore the uncle of Angelina Jolie. He might be a one-time golfer and professional gambler who's been banned from casinos across the United States. But Chip Taylor, whose real name is James Voight, is perhaps best known for writing 2 legendary songs. Angel of the Morning, made popular by Merrily Rush, and Wild Thing, made famous by the Troggs and Jimi Hendrix. The Grammy-nominated Taylor still writes and tours and created his own record label called Trainwreck Records. We met up with him in New York City. Chip, I started an interview recently on this show with the film director Adam McGowan by asking him about the genesis of his first name, Adam, A-T-O-M, because it was an interesting story. And now I've decided that that's how I'm going to start every interview from now on, because I wanted to ask you the same thing. Your dad was a professional golfer. You golfed in your early life. Is the Chip because of golfing?
Yeah, Chip was a nickname because of golfing. It wasn't a particular name I was absolutely set to choose, but when I was on King Records, the promotion fellow said that the name Wes Voight was a little bit difficult to pronounce, and so we. Probably the truth was that my records weren't good enough to sell. That was his excuse. But we changed it to Chip Taylor for a record, and then I had some hits with that.
Okay.
That stuck.
And the Taylor wasn't because of the golf clubs by any chance?
No.
No, okay.
Nothing.
Just checking. My friends, by the way, call me Bunky, so that'll tell you about my game. So I know you've been asked this probably 1,000 times before, but it's worth hearing about it again. How does a kid from Yonkers get hooked on country music?
Yeah, well, I love music to start with. You know, there were 3 boys in the family. My brother Barry, who's the guy that invented the formula that predicts when volcanoes will erupt, and John, the actor, Academy Award-winning actor, Jon Voight, and they were interested in other things, but I was always interested in music. But there was a Motorola radio right between the boys' bedroom and the kitchen. And Dad and Mom knew I loved music, and they let me fiddle with it at bedtime and see if I could find something I liked. And one night I just happened upon Wheeling, West Virginia. This is from Yonkers, New York. And there was no country music being played in New York at that time. And I heard that, and man, that was it for me.
What were you hearing? Do you remember who the artists at the time?
You know, it was Hank Snow and some other people. I don't remember exactly, but it was a certain, certain sadness that I felt in that I wanted to hear over and over again. And I guess some of the recordings had lap steel on it, but it was just the feeling of the honesty of this music, and a lot of it was sad. Some wasn't, but I didn't like the ones that weren't sad. I like the sad ones.
Really?
Yeah, and that's what motivated me, moved me. And then in the early '50s, then I had a record collection of all the country things, the Brown family, and Hank Williams and stuff like Lefty Frizzell, things like that.
Right. Okay. So it was. I know that when you talk about those genres of music back then, there was another genre that was always referred to as town and country, which wasn't really country music, but was somewhere in between.
You know, I'm not really sure. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
We call ourselves the Town and Country Brothers, but I don't remember us taking
Oh, you did?
it
I
from
didn't know that.
Yeah, it was Wes Voight, and my little high school band was Wes Voight and the Town and Country Brothers.
Oh, was it? Okay.
And that was the band that got signed to King Records, the old black record label out of New York.
Yeah. And you were what age then?
16.
16.
Yeah.
And were you writing material of your own by then?
Yeah, I was writing, and that's how we got signed. Actually, one of the things that happened is we sent our demos and with pictures to the record companies, and you know that was what everybody told you. If you wanted to get a deal, you had to do that.
Right.
And that's really not what you're supposed to do in life. If somebody tells you this is the way you do it, then everybody's doing it that way. You try another way. My guitar player, when we got turned down, we got those form letters that said thanks, but no thanks. And our guitar player, a wonderful, passionate guy, Greg Wardiak, he walked the streets of New York with the pictures and the demos, and somehow got Henry Glover, the famous A&R guy from King Records, he saw him standing at his door, invited him in. He said, "What do you got, son?" And he played him our demo. And he said, "Who's singing that song?" He said, the lead singer is Wes Voight. He said, "Who wrote that song?" He said, "He did." He said, "Do you have his phone number?" He called me on the phone. He said, "Wes," he said, "this is Henry Glover from King Records. From now on in, you are a King Records recording artist." And that was it.
Yeah.
And it was all because of Greg's desire and passion.
Unbelievable. You ended up writing in the Brill Building, did you not?
Yeah, well, see, I didn't sell enough records, Ken, to make a living. I had chart records. One record was 88 or something like that, and a couple of regional chart records, but I wasn't making enough money to survive, so I decided to take my chances selling some songs to other people, and all of a sudden, you know, I just put myself in gear with Greg's spirit and went into the city. I was nervous, went into the city and played some songs for some publishers. And see, at that time, the business was changing, and publishers were more receptive to new things and to new writers,
right,
because they didn't know what the heck was going on. All of a sudden, all this white power music that was going on for years and years was being blasted by this great Southern rockabilly stuff from down south. And in 1955, when Rock Around the Clock hit, then everything was open.
Yeah.
And so I could play some songs for publishers. And the first one I remember playing, I had to played it for this publisher, Aaron Schroeder, a wonderful guy, and I was so nervous. He asked me to play it for his partner again, and they looked at each other and they said, nodded, and Aaron said, "We'd be proud to publish that song, Chip." I was so excited, I couldn't wait to tell my parents, and then I was in the elevator, 1650 Broadway, and Aaron came out and he said, "Chip, I'm going to give you some advice. The next time you you sign a publishing deal with a publisher, never leave the office without one of these," and he handed me a check for $30. And I said, whoa. I called my father. I said, "Dad, not only did I get a song published, but I got $30 for it." I said, if I could sell 5 of these a week, I could make a living, you know, that way. And that song became a hit by Bobby Bare, and then right after that, Chet Atkins started hearing my songs, and that was the biggest thing. I'll never forget the note that Chet Atkins said to this little publisher. The publisher called me into his office to read it to me, and he said, the note said, "Dear Jerry," the publisher's name was Jerry Teifer. He said, "I'm recording that song you sent down. I have no idea who Chip Taylor is. It's very hard for me to believe he's from New York, but wherever he's from, I want to hear every song he writes." And that was it. He recorded that song with the Brown family, one of my favorite groups. Then he recorded one with Eddie Arnold. And then he recorded one with John Loudermilk and Al Hurt and Floyd Kramer. And
wow.
I was in the business.
No kidding.
Then I didn't have to sell my songs for $30. I got a staff writing job. And they say the Brill Building. It really, and that's kind of a misnomer.
Okay.
Brill Building is a cool building, and it did house some good publishers in the rock and roll period of time. But it was a building that was very important before rock and roll kicked in.
Yeah.
And it just took some of those writers in, like some great writers, Lieber and Stoller and Burt Bacharach and Hal David.
Neil Sedaka worked in there. I remember I talked to him years ago.
But Neil worked in mainly 1650 Broadway.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
See, they say the Brill Building era. Brill Building era, around the corner was this nondescript building that they built for publishers who couldn't afford to go to the
okay. All right.
And it was filled with the coolest thing, mostly R&B stuff, but it had Barry Mann, Cynthia Wilde, Jerry Goffin, Carole King. I was on the second floor, and Jimi Hendrix was signing to Sue Records at the top floor. There was Burt Burns and Bang Records and Cameo Parkway Records and all this Roosevelt music with all this soulful stuff. So it was more the blood and guts.
Yeah.
And it just it doesn't get the name.
Yeah.
Brill Building sounds cool, and it was part of it.
Okay. But so when you were there, though, and writing this stuff, was it like a hothouse for writers? Would you feed off each other, or were you isolated and just wrote your own?
Well, to be honest with you, there were. I was on the second floor, and I'd asked my publisher to not. The way it usually worked is some hit artist would be coming up for a session, And back in those days, the hit artists didn't write their own songs. And so the artist would be looking for a new song, and the publisher would tell all the writers, okay, Bobby V or whoever it was is coming up for a session in 3 weeks. We need a song this week for him. And they would all go into their little cubicles. The cubicles looked all the same. You had a sofa, upright piano, a desk, and a telephone. And they'd go into their little places and start churning out these songs. Now, I had asked my publisher not to tell me about that, because I wanted to write what I felt. I didn't want to try to write something to fit somebody. I thought that was better, just letting things come out of me and let them try to fit things. So I wasn't really part of that. I mean, one time, the publisher, the fellow that ran the publishing office I worked in, he knocked on my door and he said, I know you asked not to be told when sessions were coming up, but we have a special request. Jackie DeShannon asked if you would write her a song. And that made me feel good.
I bet you did.
And so I wrote a song called I Can Make It With You for her. And it became a hit by her and the Pozo Seco singers. But for the most part, I just wrote what I wanted to write. But yes, you're right. Most of the writers, that's what they did. They wrote on call for sessions that were coming up.
Okay. Tell me about the actual act of writing a song for you. Like how, obviously, there's a template of some kind to most songwriting. I would assume. I mean, there's a bridge, there's choruses, et cetera, et cetera. But
you know, I didn't think that way, Ken. Honestly, most of the writers that were writing back in those days were much more sophisticated than I was. The only music course I failed was, the only course I ever failed in school was music appreciation.
Are you serious? Really?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, but I didn't appreciate what they were playing. But I guess that was it. I probably would appreciate it more now. But I couldn't read or write. Couldn't write notes of music and stuff like that. And I didn't have any form to follow. All I knew was I loved blues music, which had its own organic thing, and I loved country music, which just had when feeling dictated the song, I liked those kind of songs. When a song sounded like it was written from the brain, I didn't like those kind of songs. So I knew that. So I was trying to let stuff out of me. And so where stuff went, I didn't know. I didn't start off by saying, I'm going to write a verse here, a chorus here. I would start a song, I would just play the guitar and wait for something to come out of me that gave me a chill. And
the chill. I heard you once in a New Yorker piece talk about the chill factor.
That was everything for me.
Yeah.
It was like when I first loved music. When I knew I wanted to be in the business, it was about, I don't know, it was like 7 or 8 years old, and my parents babysat me at a Broadway musical, and I did not want to go, but they had an extra ticket. And when I heard the orchestra play, I was in the 4th row, everything changed in me. And I remember going home in the car, and I did not want to talk to my mother and father. I just wanted to feel that feeling that I was feeling. It was a definite physical sensation. And I didn't want it interfered with, and I knew I wanted that around me forever.
Yeah.
And then when I heard country music, bang, another huge chill. Again, it was the sadness of it. And then when I would write a song and I would play a song, what is that? Oh, and I'd write it down on a piece of paper and play it again. And if I got that feeling, then I knew I wanted to go forward. Now, where forward was, I didn't know. And so I would just let it go. And some songs would go on forever and not have verses and choruses. They would just do things. And some had verses and choruses. A lot of my songs had interludes, like where you would stop and something different would happen. And I never knew what it was, because I would just trying to let the emotion of it take me. So when I wrote Angel of the Morning, that song is an interlude that I remember when I first wrote it, somebody said to me, you know, Chip, you can't write a song like that. It's not the right proper form. You can't stop like that. And I said, oh yeah, I can, because I'm doing it for myself.
Yeah.
You know, maybe people like it, maybe they won't. But that's the way I felt about my music.
Wow.
I just happened to be, I was, not schooled probably helped me, because no matter, though I was letting it go, it became simple kind of forms anyway.
Sure.
You know.
But you gave it all up in '81.
What's that?
You gave it all up in '81. You gave up the music in '81, or at least you walked away from it.
Yeah.
How come?
One of the things I did when I was a kid, my dad used to My dad was a golf professional, poor kid that hopped the fence of a golf course and got to be a very good golfer, then was injured in a car crash and became a professional teaching golfer. And one of Dad's hobbies was playing cards in the evening with some of his boys. And so when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, Dad used to babysit me his gin rummy games. And I loved being there with him. And I knew that Dad was good-natured no matter what the circumstance. So if he lost, he was still good-natured. But he was happier when he won. And I wanted to be a good gambler. And I studied card counting at an early age, and I was extremely good card counter, and I finally got banned by all the casinos in Atlantic City and many on the West Coast if I ever went out there, which I did sometimes. But when I was
banned... They get to know you. They see you coming. Yeah. Are they nice about it, or are they unpleasant about it?
No, they were, the way they do it, the first time it happened to me, I don't remember the casino, maybe it was Bolly's. I was sitting there playing, and I noticed the entourage of the manager and the entourage of house detectives walking behind him, and they stood right behind me, about 10 feet behind me. I turned around, I saw them walking, what the heck was going on? And the guy walked over to me and said, Mr. Taylor, he said, when you finish playing that hand, would you mind stepping back? I need to talk to you. I said, sure. So I finished playing the hand, I walked back, and he read from a board, said, Chip Taylor, you're deemed a card counter by Bally's Casino, and you will, from this day forward, you will not be allowed on the blackjack floor. You will be allowed to play any other game of in the house, but you will not be allowed on this floor. And you are hereby banned. So but something must have happened, and this was, you know, to tell you the truth, I don't remember what year it was, but it was probably right around 1970-something. And every casino, I was in town. I used to get comped to go play cards. Every casino would want me there because they knew I played for quite a bit of money. And they didn't know that they didn't keep records of winning or losing. They just wanted players who played. They'd beat them somehow. Well, they weren't beating me, but they used to comp me. So I was down there being comped by the Playboy Casino, and had all suites of rooms, all the dinners I went. I would walk around the block. That's why I was playing at Bally's, and try to beat the other casinos and break even at the place that was comping me, which was very hard for me to do, to break even. A card counter just is not in his blood to break even. So usually I beat those casinos too. But that
you couldn't help yourself.
Yeah, that week I was banned from every casino. Within a week I was banned from every casino I went to. And the one I didn't go to, I had a big party a couple of weeks later with a bunch of friends because I knew I'd get banned. And we lasted 15 minutes and had a lot of fun.
And you played the Ponies too?
Yeah, then I turned my sights to the Ponies when I was banned from the casinos. I always liked the racetrack, but I studied it hard with I know what I'm good at and what I'm bad. That's a good quality that I have. I know if I'm not smart at something. And if I want to be smart at it, I study it. And I studied with an acting teacher who I knew was a winner, and I asked him if he minded if I was, he used to give his acting lessons in the morning and go to the racetrack in the afternoon. I asked him if he minded. His name was Josh Shelley. I asked him if he minded if I joined him at the track. I'd keep my mouth shut and get him coffee and see if I could learn something. And he said, that'd be fine. And he taught me everything he could in 3 months period of time, and then I developed my own theories, and I became an extraordinarily good horse player. And so when I was writing my hits, Angel of the Morning, Wild Thing, I Can't Let Go, all those things, my day, I was just married to my wife, Joan. We lived in Westchester County, so I didn't hang out in New York. And I would get the racing forward in the evening before, study the horses on the way back. I had volumes of books with track bias and wind velocity and things like that. And then I would pick 1 or 2 horses on the way down on the train, and I'd get to my office where I wrote my songs. I'd call my bookie. My 2 Westchester bookies, they dropped me because I beat them, but then I had Meyer Lansky was my bookie, and he was...
Wait, yeah. I'm going to ask you about that. Meyer Lansky, the mob boss, was your bookie.
Yeah, well, what happened was the 2 bookies in Westchester dropped me. Somebody said, Chip, you're dealing with low-level folks here. I'll give you a bookie that'll never drop you. And he put me in touch with Meyer Lansky's office, not him personally, but it was his office. And the runner's name was George, and I would call and make my bets. I'd make 2 bets a day, and then I write my, what a life.
No kidding.
And I did very, very well.
Yeah. No, you mentioned earlier, I'm curious about this. You say you worked out for the Ponies, you worked out your own theories. You're looking at track bias, you're looking at wind directions and things like that.
Right.
How, I mean,
and for fractional intervals, that was very big.
What?
Fractional intervals.
Which are?
Well, you know, if there's 2 6-furlong races for a day, and one is run in 22, well, let's say the horses are similar quality.
All right.
And the first quarter of one race is run 22-1, and first quarter of the other race is run 22-3. Well, and if the pace collapses in the race that was run 22-1, there's a reason for it. They ran faster to the quarter. There was more competition at that quarter. So you can forgive a horse that was part of that early pace. Whereas if somebody was part of that early pace to the 22-3, that was a slower quarter. You can't forgive him. So if you use those ideas, that's just a simplification.
Yeah.
But if you use all those ideas and put it together and where the horse was in the track, it becomes like a science with an art attached to it, trying to picture where the horses are going to be. What jockey will try to do this? Which jockey likes to ride on the inside and the outside? How is the plan today? So it was really a fun, really monster scientific thing to think about and I loved it. And it was part of my brain liked doing that. Part of my brain liked to just forget about it and write something
songs.
You get a chill and write a song.
Yeah. Now, my understanding, though, is that from something that I heard you say in an interview once, and it was just a glancing reference, but I want to ask you about it, that when you walked away from the music business, it had to do with a song that you had written that you thought should have been put out as a single, that one night with the boys?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that is true. And it was a political thing, and I don't want to talk about it too much because certainly at that point I was gambling as much as I was doing music.
Right.
But when I was signed to record companies in the 70s, it was the renegade, it was the alt country thing, the renegade country stuff. It was Waylon was part of that, but he was already part of it. He could survive that. Willie was part of that. He was leaving mainstream country, and people were respecting him for it. Yeah. Graham Parsons was having a tougher time with that, and I was having a tough time. I was making records that were country, and here I am from New York. And I needed the assistance of Nashville promotion people. And for the most part, they didn't want to promote a guy from New York. They wanted to promote people that were signed to their stable the way they did it. And I was signed to the parent company in New York and asking for their help. And so I had a single that was breaking on one time, and the promotion man had been out of town, and when he came back in town and found out my single was taking the place of some other singles that he wanted worked on more, he had my single stopped. And it was my own company. And I don't really want to get into it too much, because they were wonderful people, and I had very good relationships for the most part. This was a tough one to take. But I said, okay. And the Capitol people, it was Capitol, they promised to do anything they could to help me. But already I was leaning to gambling, and I said, okay, I think I'll stop now. So I stopped and just gambled from 1981 to 1995 when my mom got ill. And I started to get the spirit to play music just around that period of time. And Mom got ill, I sat with her instead of going to the racetrack with my partner. And it was such a great thing. I remember the first day I did it, I had such a wonderful spirit with my mom. And it hadn't been attached in that manner for a long time, even though I would say I was with her a lot and our spirit was good. But when I got one-on-one with her, when she was ill, and I started to play for her and I looked at her, there was this thing between us that was so beautiful. And so the next day I couldn't wait to see her instead of going at the racetrack. And the next day, the same thing. I wrote a song. She smiled at me. I said, oh, I like this. I called my partner. I said, Ernie, I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, but I am totally quitting gambling as of today. I'm not going to talk to you about horses anymore. I'll talk to you about anything else, but I'm going to go back to making music, and I'm going to do it with a full heart. Whereas before, even when in the 70s, when I was having my records out with Warner Brothers, I was still gambling.
Yeah, you were bifocal, basically.
Yeah, so even when I had Last Chance out, I booked the tour around racetracks in the United States, my big tour. And so now I did it without that encumbrance, and I did not that I don't love gambling and didn't love it. I certainly had wonderful years gambling and a wonderful gambling partner, and but when I went full force back to music, That was the only way I would do it, to be able to go to Europe and play. What was I going to do? Try to work that out while I was betting on courses back in New York? I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I had to focus entirely on that, and it worked.
I have to say, though, when you came back to it in what year? Like 90? Was it 95 or thereabouts? Mid 90s,
yeah,
somewhere. You came back to.
Yeah.
Certainly country music had, at that point, had started to really change. Like
yeah, country music did, Ken. Country music changed, but all of a sudden there was this thing called Americana music, which was a throwback to the stuff that I loved. It was like the alt, it was headlined by the alt country things that were the renegade things that I was trying to do back then with Graham, and we were kind of rebuffed back in those days. But then all of a sudden when I came back, there was this organization, and they had their own charts and their own small stations, and there was a home for me. And so all my records went on the Americana charts, and I was back. I remember the first day I was with Lucinda Williams when I was at a dinner, and it was the first day I had been on the charts in 30 years. And somebody called me and said, your record just bulleted to number 37 on the charts, and Lucinda and I went out and celebrated. It was just the greatest thing. So,
and was it easy, when you came back to it, was it easy to get back into the writing? Did that come back to you naturally, or was it a bit of an effort since you hadn't been doing it for so long?
You know, it was pretty, that's a good question. Because between that time, 1981 and 1996, I only had one period of spurt where I wrote with my friend Billy Vera for a project he was doing, and one of those songs was recorded by Bonnie Raitt, so I had a little bit of success, but no calluses on my fingers. Then when I started singing for Mom, I wrote one song and then another song, and that evolved into an album called The Living Room Tapes. And my songwriting was back, and the flow has always been there since then.
Yeah.
Great. Sometimes you get a little bit of a block if you're on the road and you're tired or you're doing something. But pretty much every day for me, what's important to me is not looking back on what I did before, but what's going to happen today. Like today, when I go back, I'm going to be working on the mixes of some new little stuff I've written. And that's going to be fun, and I'll have my guitar right alongside of me, and in a little downtime I'll pick up my guitar. If something comes out, that'd be great. And if I get that chill, that'll be nice, and I'll put it on my iPhone just to make sure I don't forget it, and go back there and see if it gives me a chill again, and pick it up from there. So it's always tomorrow that interests me. It's the spirit of what comes that wasn't there before that interests me, and I learn from this stuff, and it's just creating is such a beautiful, blessing for me to be able to do that. I couldn't, if that was shut off, I don't know what the heck I would, It's just like you do what you do well, and you look forward to these next episodes or whatever you're going to talk to. And
I know what you mean.
And that's what I wake up for, to find out what the hell is next. This is my dad used to say that when he woke up in the morning. He had this great way about him. He would every morning, whether he stayed up late with his buddies or whatever, he was a golf professional, a hard-working golf professional, and he'd wake up with his boys ready to go to school, and he'd say, "Okay, boys, the world is ours. What's next? Let's talk about it tonight."
That's great. This has been great, Chip. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. It's been a hoot.
My pleasure. Yeah. Thank you.